by applying AI in ways that is measurable, and because it's delivering the goods, they're basically buying more systems, developing new applications, and pushing it forward. What causes an AI winter or any technology winter is when things are overpromised and underdelivered. And I think that in this case, there have been a lot of big promises made, but it's really delivering. I mean, there's great examples here. I mean, speech recognition is amazingly better today than it was 5 or 10 years ago. And that's because of deep learning. And people have turned that into all sorts of good systems. The chatbot example from the Singapore government is a great one, but actually many customer service portals are now chatbots, and you don't realize you're talking to a chatbot. And only when your problems get really difficult do you actually get flaunted off to the human to handle it. It saves these companies enormous amounts of money. Every time you upload an image to Facebook, it's run by many neural networks. The most important ones are the ones that check for objectionable content and copyrighted content. And if they didn't have these neural networks, they would have to have armies of people doing these searches, but the networks actually do it very effectively. So there's just thousands of applications where it's delivering the goods. Because of that, I don't see a winter coming. It's living up to the expectations, not failing them.
So to follow up, and I could also list a number of big wins. Google, for example, decreased the cost of their data centers. Google has these big arrays of cores sitting all around the world that is answering, within milliseconds your queries. Tremendous amount of power goes into that, and they, using AI, they're able to load balance and reduce the cost by 15%. 15% of a big number, hundreds of millions and $1 billion, it really adds up. And they wouldn't be doing it if they weren't able to make money on it. There's no doubt that this is happening, and if that's all it is, it's still a big win. But I think there's something even more important going on here. And Bill mentioned this in his talk, which was that we had these algorithms in the 80s, but until we could scale them up, we didn't know how well they would do on real-world problems. And it was only when we reached a threshold that occurred in 2012 or 13 that we were able to even approach that speech recognition and object recognition of images. And we didn't know until we actually got to that point whether or not these algorithms would scale. And in computer science, the most important thing about an algorithm is how well it scales. Because it might solve a small problem very efficiently, but if you increase the problem by 1 million, a lot of these algorithms crash and burn, and that was the case for a lot of the early AI algorithms. They didn't scale. So here we have, for the first time in AI, an algorithm that scales. As you get a bigger network, the performance gets better. As you have more data, the performance gets better. And by the way, nature was there first, because you probably know that we have a cerebral cortex, which is much bigger for our body weight than any other primate. And more was better. So nature figured out how to develop an architecture that scaled, where you could add more capabilities by having more cortex. Same learning algorithms, just applied to different types of input data, whether it be sports or physics or math. That's really the big advance. Now, it may be that we still need a lot more computer power, and here's my calculation. If you take the biggest deep learning network today, which, as you saw, had hundreds of layers, 1 million units, 1 billion connections, you could fit that network into a cubic millimeter of cortex, about the right size of a rice grain. So right now, we are powering all these applications with things that biology is almost like, a tiny, tiny little piece of what you do, what your cortex does. And you have hundreds of thousands, millions of these deep learning networks running in parallel. And so we have a long way to go in terms of increasing the computer power. And maybe there's another threshold. I don't know how long it'll take us. Maybe it'll take us a decade, 2 decades, or 3 decades. But there may be another threshold where suddenly there's another quantum leap. But on the way, there'll be incremental advances. And as those advances are made, more and more applications will become solvable. So, I think we're on a very good trajectory. I think that unlike these previous winters, I think that we're in the spring. It's springtime. Finally, the sun is out. It's still a little cool, but with the progression towards summer, I think that the flowers will start popping out, and this is going to take time. You have to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. But we see the road ahead. We see where to go and where there's going to be a low-hanging fruit that's already being exploited. But there are other bigger problems that really need to be solved too. And we need to be looking at those. And I think education is exactly the right one, because this is going to empower every human being, is to be able to have a personal tutor. It's been shown, and this has been proven by psychologists, that the best way to learn something is to have a human interacting with a child, a human that knows the child and can debug the kid if they have problems with some concept. But that's extremely labor intensive, and you can't afford that unless you're very wealthy. But if we could do that through AI, then every child could have a personal tutor. And this would be the optimal form of education. It won't replace the teacher, but it will help the teacher be able to reach all the children. Right now, if you go to your classroom in the U.S., the teacher's standing up there, and you have a class of 30 or 40 children. There are some who are really struggling, and there are some that are way ahead. And how can the teacher possibly reach all those children? You can't. You can go for the mean, but you're leaving off the tails. And so with personal education, that is going to be solved. And I completely believe that. And I'm committed to this, and I've been really moving some of my research in that direction.
In the question, there is a reference to Watson from college. As a specialist in bioinformatics, would you have some comment?
Yeah, I think in the pharma space, they've seen something similar with promise around like AI and chemistry, also around the 80s and 90s. So, a lot of the people I interact with have been around in the industry since then, so they're skeptical even when you talk about what you can do these days. But I think it's really the fact that we can actually deliver results these days, and then there's still a lot of skepticism because of all the hype. So Watson, I think, had a bit too much of a marketing campaign, right? So as a young company in the space, you really have to validate very effectively, either with academics or early partners that you can get on board. So you really want to prove that you can do something before you promise that you can do it. And I think that if people keep working that way, it'll prevent any other AI winter. But I think another idea is also that, it's kind of generally accepted now that if you have enough data and, a good data science team, you can really solve any challenge. So the shift has gone from what kind of algorithms you can develop to what kind of data you have. So I think really being innovative on using less data or innovative way to collect and label data is going to be more important going forward.
Now I have a question sheet. I'll take the first one, which is, I guess many of the audience members are from the industry, so perhaps the question is from somebody from the industry, I guess. It's about industrial applicability. So the question is, what's the area or field which is growing the fastest right now, or which deserves attention in the near future? Anyone have a comment?
Well, it's hard to pick one area that's growing faster because there's so many areas growing simultaneously. I think when I look at various NVIDIA customers, I see various applications in medicine sort of standing out because it's an area where there's some immediate application. If you have image data, you can diagnose skin lesions better than dermatologists. You can look at mammograms and detect breast cancer better than trained oncologists. Lots of applications, particularly in medical imaging, that I think, to me, stand out as enormous progress. But I also see people applying it in industrial inspection, in robotic warehouses, where AI allows them to run warehouses where the humans just sit in one place, and little robots run out and get shelves of goods and bring them to the humans, and then pick the things off the shelves and throw them in boxes, and it reduces human labor by having trained these robots to basically be, autonomous enough to travel the warehouse that people don't have to. There's just so many applications, it's hard to pick one.
So, Bill mentioned one in his talk, which is not generally known, because probably many of you don't read the physics literature, or the chemistry, or the cosmology literature, which is that deep learning has already transformed science in a way that has, in my lifetime, I would have never imagined. So as you know, scientists are collecting big data at the same pace, in fact, maybe faster, than commercial companies. The Large Hadron Collider